Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we are going to talk about the January transfer window, ins, outs, and some of the future planning that is going on as we move forward into the time where INEOS will start to have more and more say over things. So let's get right into it. All right. Happy New Year to everybody. I think this is the first one of these I've done since the post-Christmas INEOS deal thing where I was explaining everything that was built into that one morning while I was at home. But been really busy with work coming back to the new year, and that made it a little difficult to do this. But let's get into it because there's quite a bit that I want to cover today that I think will be rather interesting. Let's get started. Obviously, first and foremost, the focus in January has been on outs. I think I've been talking about that since, I don't know, October, November, that as I understood it, there'd be really not expecting much in terms of January, but that the focus is on really clearing the decks for the future, and that they want to be able to create the most space, the most flexibility for now, for FFP and for the summer window. And that has been the main focus. Additionally, when it comes to, INEOS and they're looking at the decision-making processes, they don't want any permanent money to be spent where it affects the long-term plans, and they don't even necessarily want players sold that they might consider utilizing in the future. So I'll talk about some of those outs. I have a second out section because it's going to have to do with summer and things like that too. But obviously, so far we've had Van de Beek on loan with an option, and that's one where they're hoping he can just go. Anthony Martial, there hasn't been really any offers or interest in him at the price point with the wages. It doesn't really make sense. It's a deal where deal's expiring in summer. He's probably just going to do nothing and stay and then go off and sign as a free agent somewhere. United don't expect and want to keep him. Obviously, you've got some little loans like Hannibal Mejbri is likely going to go. Facundo Pellistri is likely going to go. I believe Pellistri will have an option. Then there's the Jadon Sancho situation, and that's one of the more intriguing ones of the window because it looks like it'll finally be going through with him to Dortmund, but no option. And I think I had mentioned all the way back, even in summer, right at the end of the window, that Dortmund were interested. But they also, if they wanted to include a buyback or, an option to buy him back, that it would be pretty low, 30 million or less. And there's no option in this deal. And I think that it's going to give United flexibility. One, if he does really well at Dortmund, obviously they could just resell him for more. They also may evaluate it and say, hey, the situation has changed with things. Maybe the manager's situation has changed. That is a possibility come summer. And so it just, they just want to keep, they just want to keep on the, how would I put it? The flexibility of options open. They could resell him, use him, whatever. But they want to have that flexibility depending on how he does, for the rest of the year at Dortmund. I think it's a good move. I think it makes a lot of things possible. I didn't expect like Varane, Casemiro, and such to be moving in January. So it's really just those fringe players and some of the youth players going out on loan. But I think that's the Sancho one is the most significant in terms of potential future, not consequences, but thought process. In terms of signing, I would say at best, we're looking at a loan, a loan signing coming in. At best, seeing some kind of loan come in would be the first thing that I would expect as a possibility. I don't think that there's going to be anybody permanent coming in to, I don't think there's going to be anybody permanent coming in this window. I wouldn't expect that. Again, they want to keep the options open for the future, and so a loan signing might be the only option. So then, as far as outs goes, for summer, they're looking still at clearing out a fair few players. There's still a decent expectation that Varane and Casemiro will likely be leaving this summer. I think those are two players who are very likely that they could go. There's always the potential that things change with the plans, with a change in all of it. But I think they would like, there's already been talk with both of those players of leaving to different places. Casemiro, there's interest from Saudi and elsewhere. With Varane, I think there's interest for him to return back to the mainland in Europe, and interest from him in making that kind of move as well. Those are main, outs. You have obviously players like Anthony Martial who will leave for free. Then you have players like Donny van de Beek that hopefully that option gets taken up. I wouldn't expect much more by way of significant sales. Scott McTominay, there's a lot of interest in him, and I think that it's good potential he will move on as well. There's been some talk over, I'm not saying he's getting a new contract, but talk over his future, and I don't think that there anywhere on any kind of idea of a new contract at this point in time. So he's going to want to move on to somewhere more permanent, and it really makes sense for all parties. So I think it's more likely this summer that he will go. And then Harry Maguire's future remains up in the air. In terms of the targets, as I understand it, a lot of the profiles and people they were looking at last window that didn't get done and over the last couple windows are still where they're aiming for. And as of now, it's a forward. They're looking at right wingers because that situation is pretty dire. Although the surgence here of Garnacho in that right wing is a bit of a revelation and has been pretty incredible. And so that could change things, but they've been looking at right wingers for sure. I mentioned some names towards the end of summer, but I'll have more coming in the next few months. That could certainly turn to as well players who are flexible at striker. They've scouted players like, Tony when he was playing. And maybe they'll stay interested in that, but I don't know about buying another expensive striker until they're sure of what happens on that right side. So you have the Sancho loan, you've got Garnacho playing there. Maybe that problem solves itself and they could spend the money on a striker, but they're definitely looking at options on the right side. Some of the ones I've named before, there's been players like Michael Olise that were linked to and could be possible. And again, obviously these targets could change drastically as new people come in, but for now, the recruitment structure of scouts, things like that, are often still looking at a lot of these same profiles as before. So there's the forward position, there's two midfielders, one that's more maybe kind of a 6 and one that's more box-to-boxy. Mentioned last summer that they made some loan-to-buy options for quite a few players. Interest in them like Palacios, like Fofana, like Thuram. They've been looking at players like that. There's going to be other names as well that come up in this respect. They were scouting that one player, Zubamendi. There's been a lot of options they're looking at in this area. Onana at Everton. There's many. And this is an area where I believe they want two players to come in come summer, with potentially Casemiro and McTominay making way. Amrabat will not be signed. There's no plans to sign him permanently right now. So that's a major area of focus. And then at center back, it's one or two. They're looking at center backs, I think I've mentioned before, for both sides, and they continue to. Antonio Silva continues to be a top prospect for United, a top target, someone that they're really interested in. Let's see, I had some other names here. Yoro at Lille being watched. Todibo, we know. Inacio, Braithwaite, different players on different sides, depending on what happens. But they're going to need one, probably two, over the next couple windows. But they're hoping, that Lisandro Martinez comes back well. They can sign a first-choice right center back, and then they can make another signing in the future and gives them a little bit more flexibility. So that's what they're hoping for, but it remains to be seen there. They're keeping their options open. They've been looking at right backs, but they're not, as far as I understand it, the market is not particularly impressive to recruitment at this point in time. We'll see when there's more, structure in place, and I'll talk about some of that in a minute. Then, this will firm up, and by mid-February, mid-March, I think I'll be able to really build out those big lists like I usually do with all the different positions and things that are being looked at that they can then narrow down. And that would be quite interesting to do. Let's see if I'm missing anything on this that I meant to mention or that I wanted to mention. Center backs, midfielders, right wing, striker. Yeah, and then obviously some of that's going to depend on, when director of football and such come in, how do they want to play? What do they want to do? How do they see the team playing? And how do they see some of the players in the team already in their positions? So that will remain to be seen. Obviously, Kabi Manu has helped us a lot, but if you're thinking with Kabi Manu, Bruno, Mount, you need 2 more in the midfield. And then the forwards, either way, you're still going to need someone unless Sancho and Ahmad really light things up and Højlund comes in second half of the season and tears it up and Garnacho continues what he's doing, then the forward position gets a little less desperate. But I think that as of now, these are kind of the general plans and profiles that are being planned for. Now, as far as the structure goes, I wanted to talk about this because there's obviously a story that came out about, initially it looked like that, Jean-Claude Blanc would be, well, it's funny because very early on I heard that Blanc probably wouldn't be CEO. Then I heard that he probably would be CEO. And then now there's a story coming back after it was widely reported that he was the favorite by plenty of people as well, that he probably won't be. And I was interested to think about this a little bit because there's something that kind of I didn't really register when it first came out, and so I asked about it and got a little bit of an answer. But when the deal first came out, there was a lot of restructuring towards the end of the package of the deal, as well as how to comply with UEFA and all of that. And in the end, how it sorted out was INEOS ended up with 2 seats on the board, which include Brailsford and Blanc. Now, the way that United's corporate structure work there, you have the board seats, and then you have a CEO who also has a board seat. But the CEO is, of course, appointed by the board. INEOS got 2 seats on the board already. And I think that the point is that kind of supersedes being the CEO. Blanc could obviously be on the board as a board member and a CEO with only 1 board seat. But part of the issue is that a CEO is a temporary position. I mean, the position is permanent. The person is temporary. It's appointed. They serve at the behest of the board. The board can fire them. They can hire them. They can sack them. They can replace them. Well, you don't really want that. So with how it ended up being restructured and Blanc being on the directors, on the actual board, he can't be replaced by the Glazers, for example. Only INEOS can put a new member on the board to fill one of their seats. He's not at the behest of the Glazers in any respect. Neither is Brailsford. So it's essentially a more influential position. The CEO at United has long been someone who really just does what the board asks. The CEO is not, by the nature of the terms laid out, a football position. It's not someone that falls under the scope of football control. That doesn't mean that they can supersede that football control either, though, to just cast aside any worry. INEOS still have full control over the football. So it's not that it's an irrelevant position, but because it's not included in the sporting control as it's defined, but INEOS have sporting control, and because they already have the 2 members on the board, it looks more like the CEO is going to be a bit more of a commercial role, which is fine. That's okay. The budget is decided by the board. The football control is done by INEOS. The CEO is kind of your go-between, your ears, someone who's going to be overseeing things, just making sure everything's running right in the cohesion between commercial and football and all of that. So you still have Blanc and Brailsford who are having a vote and a significant say on the board above that position. And if the CEO doesn't work out, they'll be part of replacing them. So it's a funny situation, but the way that it landed, it kind of makes sense since Blanc is on the board, that he's not potentially going to be CEO. And that it's not going to be someone from the Glazers nor someone from INEOS. If it was INEOS, they'd have 3 seats. And if it was a Glazer individual, which it won't be, then they'd have 7 votes. So really you're looking more at an independent person, and that seems to be the plan now, is hire someone independently. That makes a bit more sense. They're voted on, approved by all of the board, and they're a bit more of like a third party to the situation. So that seems more logical with how things shook out, and should have recognized that when the way the deal came out, that those plans would kind of change, because the way it was being structured and set up, um, that would kind of change things. In the end, the way that deal had to be restructured with UEFA, with some of the other challenges, it seems like that's where it ended up. I'm not particularly bothered by it if the CEO ends up being a commercial person, a football commercial person hired independently by the directors, and then, somebody focuses on building club revenues and things like that. Fine. INEOS have control of the sport. That's the part that matters. And it doesn't really make too much of a difference. They can't be hiring and firing managers. They can't be doing any of that. That all falls under the scope of INEOS, to be clear. And I keep making that point because there's a reason why it probably doesn't matter, and it's because of what's defined in the terms. But it did not include the appointment of a CEO. So that's what I've got for that. I still believe that then you're going to get those directors of potentially Paul Mitchell, Dan Ashworth, being the main people in the recruitment area. There's probably other names, but those are the two that I think are right now certainly the favorites. So that's what I have for today. And the last thing I meant to mention on this is that, as I understand it, in the next 7 to 10 days, there will be some significant actions beginning regarding lining things up for these positions of CEO, directors, football, etc. That obviously some of that can't be done until INEOS are totally in, but that should only be 3-4 more weeks. And they want to start lining this up and informing everybody. Jim Ratcliffe will obviously be in the area this weekend to watch the game, as well as some others. Okay, that's what I have for today. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.